There's no one on, which is weird. I wonder if something's wrong. Oh, there we go. Okay. We are live. We had some computer issues at the shul. With Baruch Hashem, the computer issues have been resolved. We're just going to share this on a couple of social media platforms, and then we will get rolling. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, from the Shul of Bozeman. As you can tell, unfortunately, we still have this whole business with daylight savings time, which is why it's light outside right now. So whoever came up with it, I'm not going to translate that. And Linda, yeah, got to mute you, Linda, because of that. You're laughing too loud. We're going to share this on Facebook and on a couple of good evening, Kayla Gittel. Give me a moment here. We're going to share it. I was running a little late because as those that don't know what to say, with the internets in the plural, the internets were misbehaving, but the internets are working now at the shul. And so I'm just going to share this and then we get right into it.
It's the interwebs.
Hold on. No, wrong one. Share. I know you come every week. I say this every week. You come to hear me singing. And once I'm done singing, we can learn something. Okay, we did one more and we're ready to go. Again, I am not in charge of Spectrum, unfortunately. Not even close. So when the internet has issues, even Seth, illustrious Baruch, sitting here with me, can't help me. We have to restart a few things, and now Baruch Hashem, it is working, and we are done with all our sharing, and we are going to get right at it. So we are in a new book. It is the book of Leviticus, the book of Vayikra, the Sefer Vayikra, the third of the 5 books of Moses. It is also 2 weeks to Pesach. 2 weeks from tonight is a Seder. If you live in the Bozeman area and you haven't registered yet for the Seder, you should. But we're 2 weeks to Pesach, and so I think it's apropos that 2 weeks before Pesach, we spend a few moments talking about Jewish education. Why Jewish education, and what does it have to do with Pesach? It has everything to do with Pesach. One of the biblical commandments of the Pesach is v'yigadat lebincha. The Torah tells us straight up that when your kid will ask you, when your child will ask you, the verse says tomorrow, but it means in a later date, your child will ask you, what is up with these mitzvahs that are testimonial, these mitzvahs that are logical, these mitzvahs that are super rational, and you'll tell you'll tell your child that God took us out of Egypt, and there was an enslavement, a harsh one, a torturous one, and then there was a redemption. And that's why we're sitting here on the Pesach night, on the Seder nights, celebrating internal and external freedom. So obviously there's a universal message there. Something that right now I can personally relate to, right? I think on some level we can all relate to it at various points in our life. But sometimes in life we get stuck. Or as Chavi said, stuckness. Or what she told me the other day? Unstuckness. I told her that's going to be the name of my blog. She has a blog called Clear as Mud. I'm going to have a blog called Unstuckness. But the point is, when we feel like life could be imploding, or life is too challenging, or there's too much anxiety, or too much stress, or too much pressure, or too much uncertainty, and whether that's collective or individual, or it's universal, whatever the reason is, we have to pause and remind ourselves that we were enslaved in Egypt, and we mentioned it multiple times in our prayers every day in the Shema, that Hashem literally lifted us out and took us out of that garbage can of Egypt. So he can do that for us at any time when it's the right moment. And when it's the right moment, Hashem takes us mishibud legeula, from subservience to redemption, from darkness to light, instantaneously. But specifically with children. And I would venture to say, and this is my own words, I haven't gotten to the Parsha yet, and I haven't gotten to the Rebbe yet. Let me just let Ruth into the class. Specifically youth in our generation. Youth in our generation, if we think that growing up in the 60s or the 50s or whenever we grew up, or the 80s and 90s, it was tough. Imagine a child growing up today with a 24-hour cycle of internet, 24-hour cycle of news, 24-hour cycle of pessimism and negativity and garbage. There's never been a time in history where this many people have been struggling with mental and emotional health, primarily because of our addiction to technology, primarily because of our political strife, primarily because we each think we're the smartest person in America. So there's 350, it used to be only in Israel they thought each person was the smartest in the world, right? Every Israeli taxi driver tells you if he was prime minister. And I look at him like, there's probably a reason you're not prime minister. I'm just guessing, right? So when 8 million people each think that they're brilliant, it's a halbatzara. It's a half of a problem. When 350 million people think that they're the smartest in the room, then you have trouble. And children are trying to, I'm raising 5 of them, children are trying to grow up in this era. And it's our job as elderly, as the older folk, as the parents, grandparents, leaders, educators, statesmen, the people that are from their previous generations, to show them the path of light and show them the path of redemption. To show them the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim. That there was an exodus, and there's a God, and there was a splitting of the sea, and then there was a giving of the Torah. There's a process, and Haggadah shouldn't be one night a year. I had a person text me today, a mother. I'd love to bring my kids to the Seder, but it's past their bedtime, so I'll just do something quickly at home. You know what I wanted to respond? You don't think it's past my kids' bedtime? What is that supposed to mean? You think I want my kids up at 9 o'clock at night? I don't want them up at 6:30 at night. You think my mother wanted me up? Maybe she did. You think she wanted Yankee and Yechanan up? But this is education, baby. This is how you keep them up for the Super Bowl. You keep them up for this chachma and that chachma, and for stargazing, and for the eclipse, and for the equinox, and for every Hakachainik thing they keep them up for. But for the Seder, you have an opportunity to tell them a story, our story. Don't squander that opportunity. But that brings me into the Parsha. Now that I finished my introduction to the Parsha, let's talk Parsha. Right in the beginning of the Parsha, on page, we're going to use the live image that we use, which is page 592. Let me just open up my books here for a moment. So in the beginning of the Parsha, again, most of the book of Leviticus is the information about the karbanos, the offerings, which is why for a lot of people, the book of Leviticus is very stressful. It's not as fun as the Exodus and the sin of the golden calf and Adam and Eve and Joseph in prison and Pharaoh and the 12 tribes. You know, it's not as exciting. It's offerings. This offering and a sin offering and a guilt offering and a peace offering and a burnt offering and a morning offering and after that, I'm stuck with offerings. And by the way, I'm not just saying that about other people. On some level, I've had my days with the book of Leviticus. But the deeper you delve, like with everything in the Torah, the deeper you seek, the more incredible you will find it. And so right in the beginning, it begins with the words, Vayikra Hashem, Vayikra el Moshe. He called out to Moshe, he being God, Vayidaber Hashem, I love God spoke to him, Oyel Moyed Lema from the tent of meeting, saying, speak to the children of Israel and tell them when you bring an offering from an animal, from a cow, from a goat, you should bring it. And then he starts going into the details of how the offering should be brought, specific to what with the specific offering that's being brought. What some of you may not know, or maybe I should do a rhetorical question. When a Jewish boy goes into Cheder for the first time, so we have a tradition that when a boy is, I think, 3 years old, you wrap him in a talus and you carry him from the street. He's already wrapped in a talus where he can't see anything, like in a full blanket. You carry him into the Cheder. You bring him into one of the young kindergarten or first grade classrooms. He sits on the teacher and the Rebbe's lap. The Rebbe takes out a paper with Hebrew words with honey on it, and the kid licks the honey, and then everyone else in the class throws candies on the child. And he gets to experience his first dose of Jewish education, licking the honey. It's a way of teaching the child that the Torah is the sweetest thing in the world. It was done to me as a child. With many, it happened a few years later. I think many might have been 5 when I brought him to 6. And instead of schlepping him to a cheder, I knew better. I took him to my father, and he sat on my father's lap. My father put the honey, and I have pictures, beautiful pictures of my father holding many on his lap, and him licking the honey, and my father showing him the letters. But which letters, what words and letters from the Hebrew alphabet, from the alphabet, are on that card that the kid learns? The first letters of the Torah that the child sees. So it's actually, the Medrash tells us, the Medrash says that the first words you show a child from the book of Leviticus, the beginning of the portion of Vayikra, our Torah portion. Why? Why not Bereshit, the beginning of the world? Why not the 10 Commandments? Why not Shema Yisrael? Why not V'ahavta l'recha kamocha, loving your neighbor as yourself? Vayikra? You want to hang out with cows and goats? What are we trying to educate every Jewish kid to be a farmer? What's the purpose here? So the Medrash says as follows. And why do we start the reading of the Hebrew language, the holy language, in the laws of the Kohen and the laws of the offering? The Ein Maschil Bereshis, that we don't start with Bereshis. Because children are pure and so are the animals brought on the altar. May the pure ones come and study about the pure ones. That's what the Medrash said. This is not a Hasidic idea. This is all the way in the oral tradition of the Medrash, that children should start learning with Vayikra because they are innocent and pure, and so are the animals that are offered on the altar. Now, on a simplistic level, an animal brought on the altar is a pure animal, right? There's impure animals and there's pure animals, and to bring an offering in God's temple or tabernacle, the animal needs to be pure, and a child's pure, so let pure meet pure and have an experience. Very nice. But you know well enough to know that my dear Rebbe doesn't take a medrash like that and say, okay, fine. He needs to understand the layers of what the medrash intent. What was the intent over here? It's not like, oh, well, they're pure. So is a woman that comes out of the mikveh pure. Maybe we should learn the laws of mikveh. What kind of business is this? Pure equals what? That's why a 6-year-old child or a 3-year-old child should be reading about cows the first time he opens up a chumash. So it's interesting that, you can be 41 years old and discover new ideas, incredible new ideas, on something that you've heard your whole life because you've been part of this tradition of doing this with kids, but yet never realize the depth of it. Then at 41, you come across a teaching from the Rebbe. And you're like, as usual, it's like, oh, it's on the one hand, it's so deep. On the other hand, well, that makes perfect sense. How come I didn't hear about this before? So the Rebbe says as follows. What's unique about korbanos, about the offerings? And I know a lot of people are caught up with the offering, each one for their own reason. This one because of animal rights, and this one because of veganism, this one because of, pick your choice. This one because they're jealous, because they're not a kohen. But what's unique about a korban, and here's interesting, which is, again, an aspect I never thought of before. Now I was reading it, I was like, oh, duh. Like, how did I miss that? Korbanos, the offerings existed way before the Torah was given. We always say, oh, God did a tabernacle after the sin of the golden calf, and then you have to bring offerings. And of course, the Barbanel says it was to compete with the paganism that existed. But the truth is, if you look in the Torah, go back all the way to the book of Genesis 7, in the portion of Noah, about Noah and the great flood, it says that after the great flood, what did Noah do? Noah went and brought sacrifices to God. Not only does it say he brought sacrifices to God, you know what else it says? It says he brought it Mikala behema tahira, from all the pure domesticated animals, Mikala ifatar, from all the pure birds. That's the words in Genesis. So 2,000 years before the Torah was given, there's a guy named Noah who is saved with his family in this great ark from the flood. And what does he do after the flood? He brings offerings. Which offerings? Pure animals and pure birds, even though that differentiation between pure and impure only really happened later, 2,000 years later when God gave the Torah. Or not 2,000, 1,600 years later when God gave the Torah. And yet Noah, 1,600 years earlier, before there was even a Torah, is already making that differentiation. The Torah is telling us the differentiation was made between pure and impure. So from here, you can learn clearly that even before the Torah was given in real time at Sinai, and before there was any commandment to fulfill the mitzvahs, even before the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, because Noah was way before them. Well, not way, but he was before Abraham. There was already meaning, even though the Torah wasn't formally given, the meaning of Torah and the spirit of the mitzvahs was already there, and it already impacted the behavior of people like Noah, the righteous people. And this is precisely the reason why we start learning with Jewish children about the karbanos, about the offerings. Because think about it, if you're a 3 or 4 year old child, you're not obligated to fulfill mitzvahs, right? You're not bar mitzvah or bas mitzvah. You're not a son of mitzvah or a daughter of mitzvah. You haven't become, either for a girl 12 years old or a boy 13 years old, you become formally obligated to fulfill the mitzvahs. And most of the time we bring a child into cheder, he's not even at the age of education, where in the code of Jewish law it says at a certain age, 6 for some things and 9 for other things, you start educating children with some basics of Torah so that when they turn bar bat mitzvah, they should be able to fulfill it. We're talking about a 3-year-old. There's no obligation whatsoever. You're not even educating them. And yet, you're going to show them some Hebrew letters. What should you show them? Vayikra, sacrifices. Why? Because just like the sacrifices started before there was an obligation from the Torah, so does the education of these children also start before they're obligated in any mitzvahs of the Torah. In other words, the purity, just like by Noah, he embedded the world, he imbued the world with holiness, with using holy animals and pure animals. Even before there was an obligation to do so, we are teaching our children that purity and holiness is a value that they can incorporate in their life, even when they're not obligated to it yet, which they will only be obligated later when they become formally of age. And that's why if you look at the Medrash, the language of the Medrash, may the pure children come and spend their time studying the pure offerings. In other words, the state of the offerings when they were pure before anything else. There was just an offering with Noah bringing an offering, and he already incorporated purity there. That's how we should look at these children. In other words, don't wait till they're obligated and then wonder why they're not interested. Recognize that there's a super value in imbuing and incorporating and inspiring holiness and purity in children before they're obligated, and perhaps even more so, perhaps precisely when they're not obligated. And it's interesting because what does the word karbanos mean? The word karba means karov, to bring us close. Like in Hebrew, a relative is called a karov. A karban, a sacrifice, represents the fact that even Noah, without a mitzvah, can have a connection with God. That's why even a sinner can bring an offering as part of the atonement process. You say, whoa, what is a sinner doing here? God has room for sinners. So a karban represents the closeness of a Jew with God, even when they're not behaving exactly the way they should. So just like children, you see this pure, innocent, internal bond between a child and God, even though they're not doing mitzvahs because there is no mitzvahs for them yet, they're not obligated to anything yet, and yet there's the pure bond there. The same thing with a karban. Every Jew has the opportunity to become close to God, even if currently they may be in a state where they feel or they seem disconnected. But I think the big value here in this teaching of Vayikra is how we see education. Obviously, education is a hot topic. First of all, it's always a hot topic. It's education. But I don't know that it's ever been this hot in my lifetime. It used to be a time where educators generally taught historical information. That was before history became a matter of debate. That's even in secular schools, meaning public schools or private schools. Then there was a concept where people didn't mix into what other people's children, what type of education other people's children, like I'm not bothered when someone tells me their kids are homeschooled, or if they're Catholic and they tell me their kids go to a Catholic school, if they're Mormon, they tell me their kids go to a Mormon school, if they're Jewish, they tell me their kids go to a Jewish school. But somehow in the last couple of decades, education has become a sugar. And rightfully so. I, as a parent, I want to make sure that my children are getting the type of education that I would like. But specifically when it comes to Jewish education, there's been a major misnomer, major distortion. There are people screaming, you want to give your children a Jewish education? Well, how are they going to succeed in this world? If they don't know Shakespeare, and they don't know Plato, how did everyone say about Shakespeare? See, Shakespeare, it's I'm the shikr, another drunkard, If they don't know Shakespeare, if they don't know Plato, if they don't know, what is your child going to do if they don't know geometry? Everything they'll do without geometry. By raise of hand. How many of you needed geometry in your day-to-day life? I'm dealing with filing my taxes now. I'm pretty sure geometry is not going to help me. I'm trying to figure it out. And again, I'm not making fun of people that study geometry. That's not my point. My point is, don't come to me and tell me what you think my children must study. When it comes to education, the purity of children's education and what goes into their mind, not just informational, but hashkafa, their worldview, can be tainted as a child and can be kept pure as a child. Now, you don't have to make their worldview pure because children's worldview is pure. You just have to make sure not to taint it. And this is an incredible value of the Torah. And I don't care. It doesn't matter where any of you stand on the political spectrum. It's not relevant. I'm not making political statements. I'm teaching Torah. And I've stuck to that for 16 years, and I'm going to continue sticking to the Torah. It keeps me out of trouble, and it keeps us on a straight line. The Torah believes that a Jewish child needs a pure education. Their education needs to be, their worldview needs to be seen through the lens of Torah, through the lens of purity, through the lens of Vayikra, through the lens of Karbanis. Oh my gosh, Noach brought offerings that were pure even before there was a Torah. Let them see the world from that perspective. And those are the people that will go out there and transform the world for the better. It's not the geometry experts. And it's not the Shakespeare play actor, the actors from Shakespeare. It's not, by the way, and I don't want to sound sacrilegious, but it's not even the actors from Hamilton or the Hamilton show in itself that's going to change the world for the better. It may be a very great show that's not going to bring universal transformation. Universal transformation, spiritual transformation, ethical transformation, moral transformation, holy transformation. That is going to happen through Teiraseinu Akdosha, by hanging on, by the more and more children that hang on to the purity and the essence of Torah, as expressed particularly in the book of Vayikra, because it talks about the purity of the sacrifices. Now, it's interesting that by divine providence, and I'll wrap it up with this, yesterday I got 2 new Sfarim in the mail. I'm on a book club. I get all the new Sfarim that are printed, the Rebbe's teaching. So this is volume 2 from 1975. And the reason it's always very dear to me, because I don't know if you could tell, but it always says every one of these books of the Rebbe's teachings says prepared for print by Chaim Shol ben Chana. Who's Chaim Shol ben Chana? It's my father's brother, my uncle. My father's youngest brother, he spends his entire life working on these and typing it and making sure it's. So I got this in the mail yesterday. It was just printed, and as Hanalea was in the bath, she asked me to sit next to her. So I sat outside the bathroom because you can't take a safer into the bathroom. I said, "Oh, it's okay. I'm sitting on your bed right outside the bathroom." And I was skimming through it. And as I'm skimming through it, I came across a lot of exciting things. But one of them was the Purim talk from 1975. And the Rebbe was addressing an incredible medrash. The medrash says about the story of Purim, and I know we're getting ready for Pesach, but it's all interconnected. The medrash says that after Mordechai and Esther realized there's a big decree against the Jewish people, and Mordechai notified Esther that we have to go to the king, etc., etc. So the medrash says that after they started the 3-day fast, right, God asked the angels, what is that sound of goats? It sounds like young kids, like animal kids, sheep and goat that I hear. Koil Gadya, the sound of a gdi, a young kid, a lamb. And the angels responded to God and said, it's not the sound of goats, and it's not the sound of sheep. It's the young Jewish children. Who were they? The Jewish children in Shushan, in the capital city. Mordechai had gathered them to study Torah with them, and they told Mordechai, Itcha anu, we are with you for life and for the opposite of life. Whatever happens to you, we're on board. You're fasting, we're fasting. The Jewish mothers came and said to their kids, you can't fast, you're too young. They said, whatever Mordechai does, we're doing. Now, there's two sides to the story that I want to point out, and the Rebbe points it out in this talk in 1975. Number one, Mordechai is the leader of the Sanhedrin. He's well connected to Gesund. He's sitting there, he's a big macher in the capital city, and when there's trouble in town, not only is he going fast, and he's creating a fast, and now he's not going to teach Torah, he's not going in to teach the great scholars. What is Mordechai doing? Sitting with 22,000 young Jewish children and teaching them Torah. Because Mordechai understood the value of the Jewish people can only be experienced when we value the education of our youth. The minute we think there's anything more important than educating a Jewish child, every Sunday for the last 5 weeks or 4 weeks, I sit and I learn one-on-one. Before I take the kids to Bridger, I learn one-on-one with this kid, Adam, because in a year from now, he's going to have a bar mitzvah. He just found out he was Jewish a few months ago, and now we're prepping him for bar mitzvah. And every week I come home, I tell Javi, I love this. The kid knows nothing, like no Abraham, no Rosh Hashanah, no Yom Kippur, and boom. In a year from now, he's going to be a Torah scholar. I love it. That's what Mordechai, number one, that's what Mordechai did. He never forgot that that's what it was about. But number two, what was he teaching? Martial arts? They're coming to kill us. Why don't we learn self-defense? Let's go to the range. Let's learn martial arts. I'll become an expert in Susan Fall, in what is it called? One of those martial arts, Susan something. And that's it. Now, Shishitsu, and I'm going to take care, right? He says, sorry, I'm going to teach them Torah. You know what he taught them? Al tira mi pachat pisa. You know that prayer? Do not fear sudden terror nor the destruction of the wicked when it comes. That's what Mordechai was teaching them. He understood the value of education, and they understood the value of their education. The purity of these children annulled the decree. Yes, Esther did her part and Mordechai did his part. You know what really made Hashem excited? The sound of the sheep and the goats, which turned out to be the sound of his Jewish children that didn't forget about who they are. So that's both a responsibility on the leaders, but it's also responsibility on parents and educators. Not to forget that if we think it's okay for our kids to stay up late for the rodeo in August, but we can't keep them up for a Seder on Pesach, don't come with no complaints later that they're more interested in the rodeo than in Judaism. What did you think was going to happen? You took them to the rodeo at midnight, whatever many took me this year. I forgot it was 10 o'clock at night. It was 2 hours past my bedtime. I was still sitting at a rodeo. But for the Seder, too late. They have to get a good night's sleep. If they could be up for the eclipse and for the northern lights and for God knows what else, for prom, whatever other American concoction they come up with, for the New Year's ball dropping in Manhattan, then they could be up for the Pesach Seder. Not only they could, but they should. And you sit there and you say, hey, my dear child, I want to tell you a story. And even if at the moment, and I have this sometimes, even if in the moment you feel like you're talking to the wall, your kid is spacing out, your kid is distracted, it's okay. They will remember it. When I tell many, hey men, your head is naked. He goes, what? And then he realizes he means that his yarmulke fell off or yarmulke, whatever, right? You don't have to be nasty about it. You don't have to be stern about it. You have to mean it. And if you mean it, some of that will be acquired and ingested by the youth. I have a couple of Jewish college kids at MSU that I texted to invite to the Seder. And they said, yeah, we'd love to come. So in a very delicate way, I said, do you think you can afford the $18? Normally it's $40, but do you think you can afford the $18 for students? And if not, just let me know. I'm happy to give you a scholarship. One after another said, sure, Rabbi, we can afford $18 and we'll go online and we'll sign up, right? Now, I'm mostly happy because if a student pays $18 to come to a Seder, what does it tell you about what they value? It means they have some value to it. And that to me is a bright sign for Klal Yisrael. It's a bright sign for our people that the sound of the sheep, the sound of the goats is really the sound of the beauty and the innocence and purity of our children, untainted by all these cockamamie ideas that are out. Oh, you must tell your children when they're very young. Why? Why do I have to tell anything to my children when they're very young? Why can't I just allow them to be children? Allow them to enjoy their innocence. Allow them to enjoy the purity of that. And then they can go, when they're 18, they can go to college where they'll teach them nothing for 3 years. And while they're teaching them nothing, with their 62 breaks and the 32 vacations and spring break, winter break, fall break, this break, that break, a whole day they're breaking. That's all they're doing is breaking. It's one big brokenness. But when they're breaking, when they'll go on college, and the school used to say, we just teach information, we don't tell you how to live your life. Now they do try to teach you how to live your life, and it's very ungodly. So, but they'll have the wherewithal to withstand that because they have the foundation, the anchor that they get in their youth, which is embedded right here in Vayikra, the closeness that we get with Hashem, with the purity of those animals. May we merit to tell our children a good story, the story of our people, untainted, as is. And I'll leave you with some humor, because I always try to have some humor, about the kid who came home from Hebrew school and told his parents, you won't believe what I learned today in Hebrew school. And we were standing at the Sea of Reeds with the Jewish people of Egypt. We were going to cross, but it was covered in water. So God sent a couple of F-16s to bomb the Egyptians. And then he sent the Army Corps of Engineers to build a bridge, pontoon bridges, so we can get across. And the kid goes on. And the parents said, did you really learn that stuff? So the kid said, no, but if I told you what my teachers really told us that happened, you would never believe me. So with that in mind, we'll see you back here next week. Get ready. You got 14 days to get in the spirit of Pesach, Zman Cheruseinu, our festival of freedom. And we'll see you back here soon. Sei gesund. Now I'm going to zoom to the other side of town to get my daughter.